Right.
Games. Board games and playtesting is what we're talking about. Board games, what you should be doing it, what we're not gonna shout. I mean, it's a strong word to say you should. Maybe it's just a way to say that that's what we would do, but it might not be the best thing for you. Regardless, hopefully, some of the things we say will be true. Whether you should have more observation or whether you should leave more time for the discussion. Board games and playtesting is what we're talking about. Board games and playtesting, I'm not gonna shout. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. Time for Busy Beats and Board Game Blether, and today we are actually not just talking about what we've been up to over the past couple of weeks. I used to, I think I suggested this topic, and
You
then
suggested,
you said,
and I went, yeah, basically.
yeah, because it got me thinking. Over Tabletop Scotland,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with the Bezzy bargain bags, I released the first edition game. It was launched on Saturday. It's a brand new game. I mean, I'm not good. What is a brand new game? I mean, but it's the first printing. I personally saw it for the first time on the Friday, which was exciting. And then I was selling it for the first time on the Saturday. And parts of that ethos is like, okay, yeah, things go away for a fiver. You can get it right now cheaply.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a hopefully awareness that these things are going to change. And once it stops changing, once I'm like, yeah, that's it, that's done,
Mm-hmm.
then I'll increase the price. And so it's a weird thing that I've got set up. Essentially, public playtesting with an opportunity to make a little bit of money if the game is good enough to already be selling.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't quite what most people would consider public playtesting because I've been doing it well and I already went through a bit of a playtesting process, but there's always a sense of, oh, this number could be one higher or one lower. But a couple of times during the convention, I said, I tell you what, if you sit down and play it with me and then we spend a few minutes talking about it, for one fellow exhibitor who was already buying something else, I said,
Mm-hmm.
sit down and I'll give you a copy for free. For someone else, it was, you know what, I'll give you a copy of these two games at half price. And I just wanted to see how it would go. And my analysis was that the value that I got wasn't in the post-game discussion so much, it was in the observation. But that's going to depend on the people and everything. And a quick hello to me. It says, it's always lovely to have you. But yeah, what do you think about this topic? What do we need to say about this topic before we crack on?
Oh, well, there's loads of things to say. Loads of things. I mean, firstly, I think that, I think that watching someone play and talking about how they're playing, I think those are the main two things.
Yes, if they
And
can
they are,
verbalize through the
yeah.
thought process, that is amazing.
Different people do approach things in different ways. So you get people who really do want to learn through doing and want to teach through showing. So actually, we often talk about learning styles and how different people have different learning styles, but we don't often talk about how different people have different teaching styles.
That's an
And I'm not
interesting
necessarily
point.
talking about, people who are accustomed to teaching, because people who are good teachers can teach in different ways. But most of us are not necessarily natural teachers, and I know that there are, I know, for example, that I don't do very well at the middle stuff. I can either show somebody how to do something. Well, I can show somebody how to do something. Then I can also talk about it at great length. But I can't kind of do a combination of the two very well. It's like it's either one or the other, and that fits with a lot of things in my life. That I tend to like to be doing one thing, one particular mode, rather than doing a lot of chopping and changing. I'm not a very fusion person in that way, which is just me. But it is interesting because I do like to really understand the why behind things. So I really appreciate it when somebody else tells me what they think about something and how it, and why they're doing something, which not everybody does, which is why things like rule books are so difficult, because some people want to be shown it, some people want to have it in sort of clear descriptions, some people want to go really into all the detail, it's all kind of
Yeah, you have to cordon off
Yeah.
bits, because some people will be like, oh, don't even tell me the first level strategy. I want to learn even
Exactly.
that for myself. Or some people are going to be immensely frustrated if they don't have that.
Well, some people literally can't understand what they're doing unless they understand the why. So when I was learning to drive, then I had great trouble going up hills. I had trouble, working out what gear I should be to go up hills. And it wasn't until my mum actually took me outside and looked at a bike. We looked at a bike's gears and we were like, oh, first gear. It's the slowest, but it's the most powerful. And that's because it's the biggest, so it's got more power. And it was like, oh, okay. Because I'd kind of been conflating power and speed. Because, you would. And they're like, no, actually, the bigger the cog, the more power it has, but it's a slow power. And then and that made me remember that I needed to get into first gear or second gear to go up a hill, rather than automatically going, oh, more power, let's get into fifth gear, which was the exact wrong thing to do. So it's one of those things where some people need to know the theory behind it, and I think those are the people who need to talk about it, and those are the ones who it's not
And
the
might
observation,
even
but
need
the
like a
discussion.
little strategy tip or something saying, because if you look at the rules for poker, for example, I mean, nowhere in the rules of poker there's not even any verbal lying. So there's no sense of I might be bluffing here, because the lying of what there is basically just you betting when it's kind of a bad idea to bet. But by using these game mechanisms, you're essentially then bluffing.
There's definitely something, I think that's you rather than me. There's definitely something about what is a rule and what is a hint and what is a strategy, which is interesting. And I think that actually I think some people want to, need to find out things like that for themselves. And some people need to discuss it. And generally, I think when people are talking about finding out something like that for themselves, they often mean that they're observing it. They're observing it, or whether it's doing or whether it's just watching, versus being told it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And just to a small technical issue, I think that you've got some crackling going on. Anyone who's watching live, let me know if that's happening for you as well, or if it's just for me.
Sorry.
Let me know if my voice is crackling. But yeah, I hope you're having a good day, all. And hopefully that's been enough introduction for the topic. And let's talk quickly about what we've been up to recently. Recent highlights, playing games and other delights. Recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights. Recent highlights. And CD says, yes, it's Jess. Bez is fine.
It's me. Sorry.
Just, yeah, you were fine to start with. I don't know if there's a way around this. Like, is it worth you trying to restart very quickly?
Shall I try and leave and come back in? But it might just be dodgy internet. I'll leave and come back in.
Okay. Or like restart the browser, maybe.
Well, I'll see that. Okay, see you in a minute.
Okay, see you in a minute. So while Jess is trying to sort that out, let me tell you about recent highlights. I had a lovely walk. I went outside. I was enjoying time with family. I played so many games yesterday and today. I mean, today, in the space of about 10 minutes, we played 3 different games. A game about quickly matching words to pictures, but never words to words or pictures to pictures. A game about counting cat shapes and colors that keeps getting trickier. And, of course, a game about cute comical creatures and trying to identify them after some mixed noises. And playing these with... Hello.
Hello again.
Oh my gosh, it's so much better. It's perfect.
Well, let's see if I have to do that a couple more times during the time.
So yes, I
We'll
was just
see.
saying that I played some games with wee kids with a small child, I should say, this morning as parts of saying goodbye for a few months. So it's been like a couple of years since I'd seen them. It was super lovely. Yesterday we went out. We went to the Gallery of Modern Art. It wasn't anything, wow, this is so brand new. And maybe I'm kind of getting old and blasé about things because it takes a lot to really surprise me or astonish me, because I've seen some really weird art stuff in my years. But still, it's really nice wandering around and saying, yeah, you know what? That line work is really fantastic. They've just drawn loads and loads of shapes and colors on top of other things. That's just gorgeous. And then wandering around, also we played one LDEC game called Repeatable, which I'm quite impressed how well it works with people who are maybe 11 years old. So they really got into the story. Yeah, enjoying a dinner together, just enjoying family time. It was just a lovely day. How about you?
Yeah. Well, I have a very, very good cup of tea here, which I'm enjoying. I like the tea. So I played Dominion recently, which was fun.
Hmm?
I enjoyed it, although it is the sort of game that maybe my husband and I shouldn't play together that often, just the two of us, because we just have too similar a strategy.
What's the issue with that?
Well, in this case, it's that we both ended up with huge piles of cards, and and we were both doing the same thing. It was just a bit dull. When we've played with other people, then it's been more interesting.
Because other people kind of push towards the end, whereas you
Yeah,
kind of make this massive engine and then make the switch into getting points kind of too late. And if either of you did it earlier, then you would probably win because you're actually doing it more when you're
yeah.
supposed. I mean, this is a really interesting thing about
Hmm.
Dominion. That at a certain point, you have to make that switch from accruing engine and accruing really good
Hmm.
cards into accruing the points cards, which are terrible for you. They do
Yeah.
nothing but clog up your deck, but then give you points at the end. And once you've done that, if you want to go back into building up your
Hmm.
engine, that's also a terrible move, because then you're doing that with a clogged up deck. Um,
Mm.
uh,
We've definitely found that there are some games where you need players to kind of go for different things,
mm, mm,
because
mm.
they spark off each other. Whereas if you have two players who are doing very similar things, it leads to a slightly more dull game. Quirkle is another great example of that, and Quirkle is another game which I play very little with my husband, because when we play it, we have
Unless
on
there's
one...
a third or fourth person involved.
Yes, unless there's a third or fourth person, because when we have played it just us, we have on one occasion ended up almost with 3 squares of perfect Quirkles. Because both of us have this tendency to, or a temptation to just, to fill it in and make it look nice, rather than necessarily to get the points.
Mm-mm.
Um Carcassonne is another one where we have each thrown away points for ourselves in order to fill in a gap because it just looked nice.
Ooh.
Which works beautifully with some games. It
It
works
works.
really
I would
well.
be happy
Yeah.
with that if that was a house rule and he said this is the way we're playing it. So I've already had this discussion with Oliver Kinner. But a quick hello
Yeah.
to Robert, who says, "Morning, I played Dominion a bit too much when it came out, to the point where no one would play with me." Yeah, I totally get that. I had that basically with Jungle Speed, where I was too good.
Mm.
And then there was about 4 people I met in the country. Like, it got to the point where I hosted the official World Championships just to find
Mm.
new people to play against. But Robert has a totally different strategy. Is all about trashing the cards. If my end deck isn't less than 10 cards, I feel like I failed.
Ooh, that
Wow.
is... wow. So the
I'd be
game of
interested to play
Dominion that
against
we...
you.
Yeah, the game of Dominion that we just, that we played last night or the night before, we each ended up with about 80 cards. Now, that was ridiculous, and we knew it was ridiculous, but that was where we ended up. And actually, I think we need to choose the decks better to make sure that we don't end up like that.
And CD says, yeah, my friend Adrian, I assume this is the Adrian who also runs, co-runs WillyCon, also plays Dominion like that. I'm assuming plays Dominion super trashy. That sounds bad. You play Dominion in a trashy style. Trashy Dominion. And don't look at screenshots of game I play of Carcassonne, says Robert. I'm all about leaving the gaps and trapping opponents' meeples. Yeah, if I'm playing Dominion, I'm not going to hurt myself to hurt someone else an equal amount. And but yeah, I am going to use that to my advantage. Absolutely. And yeah, CD confirms that is Adrian from Wellicon plays a trashy game of Dominion. It's been confirmed.
But you should look at the game of Alhambra I play. I play an excellent game of Alhambra because it is about getting the tiles in the right place. It is about nicely putting it together, and I think... So I have probably played 1 or 2 games of Alhambra in my life where I have not had the longest river around the outside. But all the other, I am almost always the one with the longest river, and it is normally in the 20 or so.
Wow.
18, 20. I mean, it is, I really go for that, and it really works, so I generally win Alhambra. But I lose Carcassonne.
I mean, it's been so long since I played Dominion that I forgot that you started with points cards. And Robert says, when I first learned, my very early move was to trash them. Other players tried to convince me I'd made such a bad move it was okay to take it back. And I didn't. And I won.
Yay!
So yeah, I think that there's a lot of cross-transferable skills, and this is kind of the observation with the main topic, that by watching other people play and by listening to the stories or just noticing, hey, in a game about selecting 7 cards, speedily searching for synergies, my niece got 29 points. Now, in case you are unaware, we were at Tabletop Scotland, we had 3 tables. So one table was for the stock, and I'm not going to lie, there were a couple of times that there were 2 games being played on that table because it was just so busy. And my games can be played on a footprint like this much with board cards. We had one table that's on Saturday. It was about colouring in, plus a game about quickly matching words to pictures, but never words to words or pictures to pictures. One table for a game about selecting 7 cards, speedily searching for synergy. So that was basically running all the time. It was something we were heavily promoting. And then the third table was for a game about counting cats, shapes, and colors that keeps getting trickier. Now, obviously, 2 p.m., we swapped that out for the 2 p.m. event. That goes without saying. And if someone asked for something, we would bring it out. But I wasn't showing off a game about cute comical creatures and trying to identify the mother sphinx noises. And it still ended up being one of the better sellers just because of the buzz that it already has around it. I think we did literally 1 demo of that. And we also did one demo of Yogi on the main table and maybe 2 demos of Yogi literally just pulling out cards. But the point is that throughout the entire weekend, the best score in a game about selecting 7 cards, speedily searching for synergies, was 26. I just want to point that out. And my young relative managed to get 29 points yesterday. I was very proud. And
that's very impressive.
And a lot of this is luck, I'm not going to lie. But it was an item combo, and they had one thing that scores points for items and another thing that scores points for the clothes. And yeah, because obviously synergies, that's literally in the name of the game. And watching that, I could math it out. And I could say, okay, what's the best possible thing for all of these things? What's the best possible score for this card? Are all of these cards equally good? But when I see it, it's also about how easy it feels. It's not just how easy it is, but how easy it feels, because then in the game there's also the observation versus so much going on. So it's like, yeah, that party, that's too hard. So maybe I should throw in a few more of those icons in the rest of the deck. And maybe the nature cards want a bit more beefing up. I don't know. And so it's all these thoughts that we can tweak these cards. And for me, watching someone play it, seeing those weird strategies, like your Dominion 80 cards, or like seeing people trash cards and seeing how people actually do it, it is really important to just see how people actually play.
There's something about, so with a game like that, when there are multiple different paths, when you've got, this card interacts with that and that interacts with this, then you can get a spreadsheet and you can map it out and you can say the likelihood of getting this card and that card is that. You can also say, if you have this card, then it produces that number of points for this or whatever. So you can get a spreadsheet and you can say, here are the paths to victory. And a lot of people go on about mathematical balance. But the thing which I was just thinking about when you were speaking, Bez, was it's not just about how many paths there are to victory, or how many different paths there are, or what they all make up. It's also about how people recognize them. So whether people look at that and go, that's a good card. It's not necessarily whether it is a good card, it's whether it's recognized as a good card mid-game. Whether people go, oh, I feel like this is a good strategy. This is something where I'm like, oh, if I add this and that together, which you can't really, you can't judge that without looking at other people and saying, oh, they know what to do. When we were playtesting, Library Labyrinth, quite a lot of it was about how instinctive people found things. And it's like, does it feel instinctive for someone to say, oh, well, this piece, this card and this card, if you add those together, then you've got two red symbols and they can go off and defeat those two red symbols there. And a lot of it was about sort of making it so that people recognized that was a thing they could do.
Yeah, kind of seeing what people assume, because ultimately we don't want to fight human intuition. We want to go with it. And so understanding what assumptions people make. But let's get into that in a minute. Let's firstly do, as usual, a brilliant thing. What's the little thing which is brilliant? And we don't just mean in Dominion. We mean in general life. I'm going to say that leaves, I don't know if I can get this on camera, leaves, yeah, hooray. That is an actual leaf.
It's a good leaf. It's a nice varied color leaf. There's an actual name for that, and it's something like variety, but it's a longer V word. Anyway, it's one of those leaves.
Leaves are good because they're pretty. I love seeing the sunshine through them. I like the fact that they photosynthesize and they make the air better for us to breathe. Any other reasons why leaves are brilliant?
They're good for the soil. They, when they fall down and they, provide mulch and then compost and things. We have some trees out the back, so we have a back garden. We have some trees which were a bit too close to the house. Basically they used to be a hedge, and then, the previous owners didn't keep them in, good hedgeness, and so they've grown out of the hedge into trees, and so we need to turn them back into a hedge. Have them managed again. But they produce leaves all over the place, and it's good for the compost. It's good for the rest of the garden. It's good in general. I like leaves. I like trees.
Yeah, leaves are brilliant. And talking about brilliant things, so is observation. I'm discussing in playtesting. So this is where I say, yeah, please comment, ask questions, from follow. Yeah, Jess, your thing is getting a wee bit bad. I don't know.
Oh, shall I go away and come back again?
Actually, if you could, I mean, if it only takes 10 seconds, that was
easy.
Brilliant.
Bye. See you in a minute.
So, yes, just to, Roberts, I assume that this was your if you mean in Brilliant Things in Dominion, playing a remodel to turn a province into a province and run down the clock when you're ahead is always a thing. Oh yes, because you're taking things away. That is quite high-level strategy. Now, Robert has an interesting question. Do you find that players sometimes assume rules from other games? I.e., in Alhambra, you cannot leave a hole, but in other games, you can leave a hole. So this is an interesting question about assumptions.
Alhambra! Yay! Sorry, that is
And-
one of my favourite games. Maybe because it is so in tune with what I naturally want to do, which
And
is
this is
clearly
a thing,
castle building in
because
Spain.
yeah, you talk about having to fill in the holes, which I know Oliver Kina from Tabletop Games blog also said that if we were to play there, they always fill in the holes. So if there's only one thing that goes into that hole, you have to fill it. And I said I would not be okay with that as an unspoken rule. But if they said this is how we play and made that a house rule, I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm happy to play this variant, and yeah, because then it's clear to me, and I come to games for a bit of that clarity. Now, yeah, this is also an interesting thing, because some people might assume that you can leave a hole, but that goes with what you would assume normally anyway. So you kind of assume the opposite for Carcassonne, which is really interesting. And it kind of ties into, it's all about our life experiences, what games we have previously played, what's in tune with our own model of thinking. And it gets back into that thing of, when is a game ready to release? It's not when you get feedback that makes a teeny tiny difference. It's when you get feedback that makes a massive difference for some people, but might make it potentially worse. It's not making it a better game necessarily. It's just making it a different game. And you have to decide who's your target audience and what are they likely to assume. If you're going against those assumptions, don't go against those assumptions unless it's a key part of the game. That's what I would say.
Yeah. So something like, for me, one of the games that really goes against assumptions or goes against all my instincts is The Crew. I am really not very good at The Crew. And that is partly because I'm actually not very good at sort of secrets, and I'm not very good at sort of giving people coded messages. I never know what the codes mean, which would mean I'm probably not going to be very good at bridge. And the people I know who are good bridge players, they are excellent at The Crew, because it's a cooperative trick-taking game. But because I've done so many trick-taking games, and I think of trick-taking games as being sort of my initial card games, the games that I learned to play first, when I was little, were those kind of, those traditional card games, as we played a lot of rummy and some whist and, poker, not very good poker, but so I'm kind of accustomed to trick taking, but because I've got so much of an ingrained, well, you're taking tricks for yourself, then it's sort of, you have to work to get over it and say, well, hang on, you're cooperatively taking it. But that's part of the point of The Crew, that's why it's hard, that you're trying to get around this, taking tricks for yourself and doing it cooperatively.
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, The Crew, it was a revolution in trick-taking games. And sure, you can have partnerships, but it's a fully cooperative trick-taking game. I know of no other such thing. And that does bring a lot of, things going on. And I think that these kind of assumptions are, if we're keeping tally, I would say score 1 for observation. Because Robert says, while I was playtesting at Tabletop Scotland, I said, you can place a tile anywhere on your board. And 10 minutes later, players are assuming restrictions that just don't exist. And so to that, I would say, well, if I were playtesting that game, that would make me think, okay, maybe people need a little reference card. And then it says the word anywhere in block capitals and underlined. And people are like, oh, I can play anywhere. Flashing. No. Because if it's a different color, then sometimes people miss it. That's the curious thing. If
That is true.
the main bit of text is black and then one bit that you want to highlight is red, it might actually have the opposite effect.
Plus, those notices, there are quite a few notices around here, which are like on gardens and things. There's a community garden, for example, and they've got quite a few notices which have been printed out, and a lot of the keywords are in red, which fades far quicker than black does. So it's really interesting. So now it just looks like it's like, a bit of black text, and then this big sort of mainly missing word where it's very faded and you can just about work out what it was, but the black text is
through
like
intuition.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite funny.
But yeah, I think that noticing these problems and noticing these things, and then sometimes you have a reference card because there's a lot of rules to remember. But sometimes, even in categorical, because people got flustered because it's a real-time game, it's okay, I shouted the thing, now it's flip, cover, clap. And that's it. You just need to remember flip, cover, clap. But then people sometimes did cover, flip, clap, which makes a big difference to the timing, because then people don't get that half second. And even if the game's literally just 2 rules, place a tile anywhere on the board, score your points, something like that. And then just having that for everyone. And would that make a difference? Then you are trying to, you don't have to have the graphics finished for your prototype, but I think that anything that's going to change the understanding of the game should be there.
Sometimes I think the theme can really work to underline those assumptions. So I'm thinking of another game which has a put something anywhere on a board, or not quite, but I'm thinking of Battleships. And it makes sense, kind of, or it always made sense to me that, that you're up above looking at this grid, this is obviously a very warlike game, but you're pointing at squares and you're bombing squares in order to try to hit, the other person's battleships. And that made sense to me, that, that you can get anywhere on the board. You don't have to start in this corner and walk over it, because you're not walking. You're this kind of, this omnipotent, general type figure, just pointing at things and they happen, which I think theme can really help to key in people's assumptions and instincts somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a lot to think about. And yeah, Robert saying, oddly, I took out a player aid because some people were saying that a player aid might look intimidating. But this is, again, score 2, frankly, for observation versus discussion, because this is people making a guess, making a judgment call, not based on what they actually experience, but saying, hey, other people might find it intimidating. And I would say that unless you've actually got, what's the word I'm looking for, actual evidence that people did find it intimidating, there's no reason to not have it. And yeah, sure, it's a publisher decision, but if you look at Quirkle, that probably wouldn't have been nice, chunky wooden tiles if, it hadn't been presented by Susan McNally Ross. I think it's who presented it in such a beautiful way. Sure, the designer can't dictate much, but you can suggest and inform a lot to the publisher, even if you're licensing it over. And I think this is the key thing. It's all well and good for people to say, hey, this might be a problem. But unless you're actually talking about massive damage, like saying, hey, this might be a problem because it reinforces negative stereotypes within the world and can actually cause structural damage within our society, or hey, this might be a problem because it might give opportunity for, I'm not going to get too dark, but I have had actual conversations about problematic potential cards in Yogi Guru that I decided to go down a completely different route. That it was like, yes, this would actually be a violation or potential violation of safety, and we should not allow groups to play with this, because we could imagine that, being...
Yeah, well, it's the same where you sort of, there's a point at which you say, should we, we've got a room full of teenagers, should we really be bringing in a game of Twister for them? And, and it depends on who you know. And it's the sort of thing where you've always got to be aware of, those things. But yeah.
But like, if it's just people might get confused, or people might make the wrong assumption, that's not like an actual big problem. That kind of thing, I would just leave it to the observation. Are your target audience actually being intimidated? Because I imagine most people wouldn't have the assumption, oh, this is a serious game, but be like, oh, okay, at worst, they would be like, okay, this is a bit superfluous, but they would glance down at it and be reminded of the key facts.
I think, so I do agree with you, mainly. The slither of doubt that I have is that sometimes this might be a marketing thing. If you're trying to get somebody to buy a game, then if they look on it and go, oh, this looks like it's got player aid cards, and oh, that might be a bit too complicated. I actually wanted a game for so
you don't even have to mention the player aid back of the box.
Exactly.
Legally, just say there's this many cards. Honestly, a breakdown of types of cards is something, or tiles, is something that normally happens in a Meteor game. You would say something like, this many tiles, this many cards. You have to give a, content in terms of what it is structurally, but you don't have to say it's got 12 invention tiles and 24 dreamer tiles and 5 reference tiles.
You can if you like. And we were thinking about that for the back of Library Labyrinth, because we have to put something on the back of Library Labyrinth, and we've decided that we are going to split things up a bit more than we, need to. So, we have divided things into 3 different categories of cards, because it makes sense within the game. And we have also said, you get your little player pieces, but you also get a specific piece for the, the curse, the bookworm, and and that's the sort of thing. And that's because, but that's simply because we think that the type of people who are going to be playing it will appreciate it. But with a different game, people might just be like, well, I don't need to know that. That's fine. It's not a problem.
Yeah, and this is where I think the power of empirical evidence is so key. Playing with your actual target audience. Most people don't have the budget for focus testing. I mean, it's when you get to the realms of Magic the Gathering that they are able to actually bring in people, bring in newcomers, and see what is confusing, and observe them through the one-way mirror, and then pay them for their time, which I probably get closer to that than lots of indie publishers, just because I am able to do print on demand. I'll print 50 copies, and by the time that's sold out, then I'll have a much better idea of what numbers to print. I'm not going to lie. After I printed the next edition, where it's going to be like maybe 200, however many copies, then by the time that sells out, well, it depends how many I print, because if I print 200, then it might all go to the Kickstarter backers. But you know what I mean? After a while longer, I'm sure that in a year's time, I will have more ideas of, oh, actually, this should maybe be slightly... And everyone agreed. I think I printed 100 copies of a game about quickly grabbing creatures, matching words to pictures, but never words to words or pictures to pictures. It basically tells you what it's all about. You've got words on cards, you've got pictures on cards. If a card is of a red cat, then the word red or the word cat would match with it. And that's the basics of the game. In the original version, you also had double-sided cards, so you could flip them over, and you had some cards that had 2 things on it, which was quite fun. Here, in the second edition, I've just made it single-sided, so you kind of don't have to think, oh, do I flip? Do I cut? And at the end,
Mhm.
okay, there's 5 things left. Are there any matches? Let's keep matching. And whereas now it's like, yep, if there's no matches left and everything's just one pile, that's the end of the game, because it's clear, you can see
Mhm.
everything. That makes it slightly more streamlined. And also the other thing I did is I had some cards that were in matching more things. So in the original thing, the ones where it was 2 card kind of twisting your brain, it might have a colorless cat and a colorless bed. And so it would, just to get you thinking in a new way. But then those were equally hard to grab. And so what I wanted was something to make the game work faster, because that seemed to be something that people really enjoyed when it was just blue, 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 blue. And so I had added cards where it was stars and a bed in all 3 colors. So now it matched like 4 out of the 7 possibilities. And another card where it was a red bed and the word blue, for example. And so, and another card where it was a red bed and the word yellow. So it would never match what's already on the card, but match that word or that picture to another card. Again, it's something to, and people almost unanimously enjoyed that. And I'm like, okay, I think it's really good. There's one more small tweak that I might make, taking out 3 of those things just for the card ratios. And because in theory, if people matched those words picture cards at the same frequency, then it would all work out, but they don't. And it seems like people actually gravitate towards one or the other. And that's a really interesting thing. Some groups gravitate towards matching that as a picture. Some people gravitate towards matching that as a word. And then if you've got all the same type of people around the table, then you are going to be left with a slightly excessive number of pictures or words, depending on the personalities. And that's, again, it wouldn't, mathematical modeling doesn't account for these slight foibles of human behavior.
Yeah.
Idiosyncrasies.
Yeah. Do you find, Bez, that the people that you're, so when you've got a group that's playtesting it, and whether that's at a convention or whether that's at some kind of playtesting event, do you find that the people who are testing it, that they have a sense of what they like or don't like? How well are they able to articulate their feelings about the game?
That's a really interesting point, because I think that, yeah, with the 2 examples, so I had essentially 3 people do an official playtest of that one, and also I did play my Drawn Together game maybe 4 times, or I watched people play it, I should say. On Saturday we had the colouring in, and it went a lot faster, and then so anyone who went and asked for colouring in on Sunday, we said, hey, but we do have this game. Would you like to try this game? And then I'd go over and ask them, so what did you like? Did you feel it was balanced? And would you like anything to be changed? Did you feel it was too short or too long, or the right? And everyone would be like, yeah, it felt good. Yeah, it was the right length. It was, and people are more likely, I think, when talking through these things, to just be like, yeah, it was all good, and be kind of like that and accept everything as being good. And I think for most people, it is a real struggle, because it is a skill to be able to then actually vocalize their emotion.
Yeah, and vocalize what in particular you thought was good or bad. So when you playtest with other designers, which happens at specific playtesting events, of course, then I found that really useful, because people are much more able to say what's wrong with something. There is, of course, the downside I find tends to be that people really like to put in their own ideas. But I find it much easier to say, okay, right, well, I'm taking on board some of your ideas and I'm just going to ignore those lot. Which, of course, designers know that. And, and I think it's quite useful to have a group of people who are able to be blunt with each other.
Yes,
You
100%.
really need that. You need people who are going to say, that bit did not work for me at all. But then you get different people, and of course, different people find that different things work for them. So,
I mean, when I do comparative testing, I've done tests where I look at Friday daytime playtest because it's London. There's a lot of people going through, and I would say typically we get maybe 4 people who've been there loads of times, and I know them well enough that it wouldn't be weird for them to ask to sleep over if they had to. And I mean, with one of them, it would be slightly weird, but I guess if their house wasn't just because they live so close, that would be what makes it weird rather than me being uncomfortable with them sleeping over. But yeah, then there's maybe 3 or 4 people that I know I remember them, I've seen them a few times before, I've played games with them, and they know the score. They know that when I ask, okay, how could this be better? I am actually asking, how could this be better? What's bad about it? What would make this a better version of itself? And then there's typically maybe quite often like 3 or 4 people that I've never seen before, might never see again, and are just there to say, oh, what is this whole playtesting malarkey? And what I found was that actually when I was playtesting through the LDEC contests, that was really useful because then I was able to get people to score it on my rating scale, which it uses what you've got with your hands. My rating scale is from +2 to -2. And first, you rate the game. How did you feel about it? Would you be likely to play it again? And then I'll maybe ask people to quickly vote on something. But it'll be do you think that this should be more like this? And it's a yes or no question. This is totally agree, this is totally disagree. So people don't influence each other, they vote at the same time. So I say 3, 2, 1 vote. That's my method. And that sort of discussion can actually be really useful with a big group, playing a few different games if you are then together for like an hour or an hour and a half. Because then it's like, okay, now I've got a baseline. One person might be giving 2 out of 2 to everything. And if they only played one game, I wouldn't know that. But if they played 7 different games and there's only one that they say, yeah, this is 2 out of 2, and actually I would buy the deck just for this one game, then I know that that's exceptional. It's not that that person is exceptional. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you also get a sense for what they individually like. There are some people where you're like, oh, this person is really, just doesn't enjoy letter games, or word games or whatever. That's fine. They're not a language person, but they really enjoy colouring in, and so there's so once you have more of a sense of what appeals to them, then sometimes their ratings make more sense. And it's also the same for us as well. There are things which I enjoy and things I don't, and it's good as long as we're quite open about these things. But sometimes it can be difficult to recognise and articulate them in the first place.
I'm almost going to say that if dice play a big part in your game, then, my rating of it will drop by a significant margin. Because that is, honestly, I like to have a fair bit of control in my games. I don't mind a random draw of a card as long as I can then maybe use that card in a variety of ways. Or, if it's exploding kittens, I will play like one game of it every couple of years. I'll be okay with that. But I would happily enjoy that kind of tension. Sure, that is a very short thing. It's all about that. Oh, did I essentially Russian roulette? Is it causing me to die this turn? And that's the exciting thing. So what we're learning is that we both kind of agree that observation is the more critical thing in the observation discussion part, but we both agree that designers, anyone who's better able to articulate themselves makes the discussion worth having. The other reason for having that discussion, frankly, is sometimes I know this sounds terrible, but to validate the playtester and as a form of ranking them, because it's like, and this one time I played a fairly meaty game and it was like 90 minutes. It was with a designer that most people will probably know, and it was a fairly meaty game. And then we played through, and then it was like, oh, do you have any questions? And we're like, no, I basically saw everything that I needed to just for observation. And in retrospect, that's probably true, but it also felt to be like, oh, that's a bit of a shame. Like there wasn't any opportunity to say, oh, what did you like or not like or anything.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that actually they don't know. They don't necessarily know whether you liked it or not.
Well,
You know,
that
and I
wasn't
think
what they were
it's
testing for, though. It was at a point where the game was in late development, so they weren't going to change the theme. It had already been signed by a publisher, and it's come out, and it's done fairly well. And it's a skilled designer, but I think that as a playtester, I'm going to be honest, with a bit of everyone's got an ego, right? Everyone wants to feel like they've had an input. And so I think that, yes, recording names, which I could be better at, is great, but also just checking in with people. Okay, which of these is what did you think about this? And with the drawn together part of it might be that I just want to see, is this balanced? How did people feel? How does it go? Do people continue to play it in a variety of ways? And I'm not going to get any of that based on feedback, but it might still be worth me asking, did this feel balanced to you? And even if that's a weird question to ask someone who's just played it for the first time, the opinion of the first-time player does matter.
I think it really does, because everybody's going to be a first-time player once.
Yes.
Not everyone's going to play it 10 times, but everyone who plays it is going to have a first time. And I think I think it does matter what the player feels as well. Regardless of whether, you might just be testing for a very narrow thing, in which case I think it's really important at the beginning to say, look, this is something where I just want to see what you do with this particular thing. I literally just want to see whether you interpret this rule in the way I think you're going to, or something.
Sometimes you shouldn't bias people, because if you say it's only about this one particular thing and you point to the thing, that will change the way they interact with the thing. It might make them interact with the thing more than if they hadn't been pointed towards the thing.
That is very true. I mean, whether there's a way to let it, to get it less biased, in order to say there is a thing I'm looking for, but I won't tell you what it is.
I mean, you could just say, this playtest is mainly about observation. I'm going to be mainly going based on what you see. And yeah, Jess, if you've got a moment but because you were cracking up, maybe restart as well. You are still muted.
It's gone funny. Let me restart it. Okay.
Yes, but I think this is a key point. What were we talking about? Oh my gosh, I've got a terrible short-term memory. We were talking. Can someone remind me what we were talking about? Biasing things, observation playtest. Yes, that's it. So my point was that if you just tell people this playtest, I just need to watch you for a bit, then that prepares things, because I think that it's important that people are informed and given expectation as to how this playtest is going to run. In a playtest where you might be changing the rules halfway along, let people know that. In a playtest where it's like, yeah, this is probably going to crash and burn, and I just need to watch that happen. It's the first time it's ever been played. Say that and see what people think. If it's like, hey, this is a game, it's the first time it's ever been played, but I've thought about it a lot. Again, set up the correct expectations. And the sound is so much better. But yeah, I've just been saying set up the correct expectations, whatever. But ultimately, the unanswered question that we had, like the unstated question, is, let's say you've got a 9-minute game that actually that maths doesn't quite work out. Let's say you've got a 10-minute game. Broadly speaking, it takes 5 minutes to teach. You've taught it, watch people playing for 10 minutes. You've got another 12 minutes. Do you play it again for 10 minutes? Is that more useful? Or is it more useful to discuss things for 10 minutes? And I know the answer is it depends, but what would go into that decision for you?
I mean, that is difficult because it does depend. I think I
What
would
does it depend
tend.
upon?
So it depends upon, firstly, whether you're doing it with exactly the same players.
Oh, yes, it would be
Yeah.
the same players are there anyway for another 12 minutes. That's a hypothetical situation.
Yeah.
So either you could get them to play to see if things change, to see if they still enjoy it after their second game. Let's assume that they enjoy it enough that they are, yeah, I would be happy to play that again. And then would you want to play it again to see what strategies they employ, to see if their second play experience changes? Or would you just want a discussion?
Towards the beginning of my development of the game, and probably right at the end, then I'd go for the discussion. When it's, because then I'm like, oh, okay, can you tell me what bits you enjoyed about it? So if I'm only just starting out with the game, then I'd be saying, okay, right, I saw that you took that strategy and you took that strategy, can you say something about that? I'd want them to talk about it. Towards the end of the game development process, when I'm really secure in the game, then I'd probably want them to tell me, well, to be honest, I'd probably want them to tell me how it made them feel. I'd want to know whether they thought it was fun, whether they enjoyed it, and probably there. I mean, this
But
is
at that
probably.
point, if they don't find it fun, then either you've gone somewhere wrong earlier in your process,
Yeah.
or they're just not in your target audience.
But to be honest, well, I mean, that is the thing actually about target audience. Then I'd actually be having half a mind to marketing. And this might be because I am not just a game designer, the same as you, Bez. We do a bit of everything. And so I'd be thinking, okay, how can I describe this to other people? How can I'd have one eye on the rule development and another on the marketing, and the going, oh, this is a game about such and such, and so I'd be really concentrating on what bits they liked so I could explain it better in the future to other people. But they're in the core development bit of the game. So once I was confident I had the game more or less right, and until the bit when I was trying to work out the marketing strategies, then I'd be thinking, okay, let's do it twice. Let's see another round, because in that main section, the main body of the development of the game, then I'd be going, oh, actually I just need to see it more times. Plus it's often really interesting to see somebody play the same game twice and see if they did do something different the second time.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's also interesting because of the way that our marketing strategies differ. And I don't see the Bessie bargain bags or anything. I view them quite, hopefully openly, as, yeah, these are never exactly finished. I will continue making tweaks. Honestly, for the 10-year anniversary of the L deck, I almost feel like I should make some small changes. I'm still not sure what changes those will be. I'm thinking of one more U. Just, get one more U in there and then take down another letter. I'm not sure which one. But I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I've also thought that the SG card, those two letters should be split up, and also you should probably go on the letters which aren't vowels, just to spread out the vowels across the deck. In retrospect, that would have been slightly better, but yeah, I can't.
It's these small tweaks you really want to make. Once you've got something out there, you're like, right, what more tweaks can I make to it?
And it sounds like what you're saying is that from at the early point, you want that discussion because you want the broad sweeping changes. You want to be given that direction. In the middle, you already have your direction. You want to just see people engaging with it. You're able to do the observation, and you want them to play as many times as possible. Just rush through the games. Towards the end, you might even be asking, how would you describe this to someone else? How would you describe this to a friend? Would you recommend it to a friend so you can, or who would you recommend it to, so that you can get a better idea for your own marketing? And I think that's a really strong, sensible way to do it. I would also say, I guess I'm doing it slightly out of order, but yeah, like recapped a bit at the start. Yes, it also depends who you're doing it with, because fellow designers, someone like David Brain, who doesn't like party games that much, but will happily play Yogi Guru, not only Yogi, but like the even sillier version.
Yeah.
And then we can play that a couple of times and then spend literally an hour talking about it and which exact cards should be coming out and the possible problems with physical discomfort, both for people who are accessibility issues, but also things that might lead to, more problematic behavior. And I think that, so what we're saying is it depends on the point in the life cycle, it depends on the person, and I guess it also depends on your role, why you are playtesting this, and that's the key thing. Why are you playtesting? What questions do you need answered? And how are those questions best answered? Anything else we need to say?
I don't know. I think not specifically on that, but just on the wider issue about testing, about the observation and discussion. That I think all of this, when we're talking about playtesting, we've got to be open to the idea of change, and I think that is what we've been talking about, throughout the whole thing. How is a game going to change? How can we best facilitate that change? And I think it is all about being open to change, because it's so difficult. When you've got something that you really like, it's so difficult to then change it.
Yeah, and it's all about killing your babies. Robert says,
kill your darlings, no.
I think I need to embrace the crash and burn test more. I've been slow to test things until ready, but if expectations are managed, this is okay. Yes, 100%. I would say that it's doing it in a convention setting, to me, given the opportunities that I have elsewhere, feels like it would be a waste of that convention time. I feel like, for me, okay, let's be real for a moment, and talk about, I know I've talked about them a lot, but like the whole Busy Bargain Bag thing. And when it first came out, it was a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify the most mixed noises. It was like, yeah, this is basically done. And it sold out, and then Kickstarter went well, and was like, okay, I did say that I'd increase the price, and it wasn't until it was nominated for Golden Geek that I really should increase the price to $7.50. That seems reasonable. And that was a game that I genuinely had no idea how it would do. Whereas a game about quickly grabbing creatures that's totally different to counting your turnips, that was just a game I wanted to make, but I had an idea of how it would do. And with that second game, I tested it with other designers. I was like, okay, I'm going to just keep trying rules, and using the grabble mechanism of everyone's grabbing their own pile only came out through discussion. When David Brain said, yeah, I kind of prefer that version, I was like, yeah, that could work really well here. And then someone else suggested the turnip mechanism, which made it all work. And that's just such a brilliant thing, which adds one tiny strategic decision to a game, which is a really and I think that there's an interesting discussion to be had of games with essentially 0 decision points, like Double, where it's purely performative, or games with minor decision points like Yogi, because the question of which finger to touch your nose with is actually a decision, and then, it's in that little space, which I think there's a really interesting space for the mass market. But anyway, with rushing through 5 different variants, that was fine with other designers. But when I'm playing with other people, it's like, okay, here's the game about counting cat shapes and colors that keeps getting trickier. Oh my gosh, having 2 at a time is too difficult. Well, hooray, it sold out after UK Games Expo, but I'm going to try it with another color of cat, and just one thing, and I'll play it once with designers, see if it's still complicated enough. Yeah, they all say it's complicated enough, so yep, let's go with that, and let's just play it, and I think it's done. And that's basically the way I work, and I don't even bother with the promoting as much as I should, because at this point, what I've learned is that I am blessed that people have started to be aware of who I am, and people have started to be aware of, okay, Bez has got this other game, if it sounds cool, we'll check it out. And
there's different sorts of promotion as well. So I've actually been talking to people about this, just in general, about talking about things like social media, because there are so this is not just board gaming, this is the wider world, and quite a lot of the other stuff I do has to do with political campaigns and pressure groups and and ideas. And there are very definitely more than one way to promote things, because a lot of people do go, okay, let's have a discrete campaign about something. Let's say we want to promote this particular idea, we want to promote this particular game, let's have this marketing campaign where we get together these adverts and we put it out for a certain amount of time, and that is what the bigger board game players do. But there's also a much more sort of long-term community advertising, as it were. And it's not really advertising, but it's being part of the community, just constantly, the sort of the networking and the being there and the talking to people and the slow promotion of the stuff you do, which you are amazingly good at that bit, Bez. You're
Thank
really
you.
good at that, just sort of generally being there and being like, hey, this is what I'm doing, and here's what I'm doing, and here are the things. Plus, it's also that kind of sort of networking and promotion that helps other people as well. It rises. So it doesn't just help with your own profile, it helps with other people as well, which is a really good thing.
Thank you very much. And hello, Alex. I hope you are having a good morning. And yeah, I don't think that needs any reply. Yes, there's other ways to do it, and that's an entirely different discussion, whether it's a game where you have a few enfranchised players that you then send off to start doing lots of playtests and run things on your behalf, and maybe you get this one game that's gotten people so addicted that they keep pushing it for you, which is amazing. And then, yeah, or maybe you are someone who does a game and then they wait a few months, and then if it doesn't sell out, they're like, yeah, I'm going to abandon that. Or maybe you're someone who, like me, who, because I do print on demand, I could keep printing, a few of this, a few of that, a few of that, and take them all to conventions, and I think it would be okay. But yeah, that's a completely different thing, and I think we should, at this point, ask a question of our audience. So my question of the audience, we've already talked about this, and I would obviously love to hear your thoughts, if you have any thoughts remaining, about the value of discussion over observation. But my question is, do you have a question, Jess? My question was going to be,
no, you go ahead.
What was the last thing you play tested? Actually, as a playtester, if you've ever playtested someone else's thing, how important to you as a playtester is it that you are asked your opinions?
Oh, how important is it?
As a playtester,
surely the whole. I mean, this is going to sound terribly, terribly ridiculous since I'm, but surely that's the whole point of playtesting, to be asked your opinions about it at the end. I mean, no, for me. So though I haven't been recently, there's an online group which I have regularly been to, which is virtual playtesting. That's one of the ones I enjoy going to. There are, of course, some other games, some other groups out there, such as Break My Game. But the one I tend to go to is virtual playtesting, which happens via Discord, and that that basically means that that during an evening there will be probably each person does playtests 2, 3, or 4 games generally. That's the standard. Now, I think it's really important to be asked your opinion. And that is one of the things I most look forward to. Partly because it helps me to think about what I've actually done. Because yes, it's helpful for the designers to see somebody play through and say, okay, you made those decisions instead of those decisions, but it's generally helpful for them to understand why they did it. And and sometimes I'll go, well, I have no idea. Those were just the first cards. Those were the pieces available to me. And sometimes it's knowing whether somebody purposefully made a choice versus whether they didn't realize there was any other choice they could have made. But it's also, and virtual playtesting tends not to see very many games which are nearly finished. They tend to be towards the beginning of the game. But I think it is also really important for designers to look at how the game makes other people feel. It's not just whether it's fun, but whether it's an exhilarating, quick, exciting game, whether it's feels a bit like you're going through the motions, whether it's a puzzly game. Now, to a certain extent, you can tell that, but there is absolutely no substitute for the person who has played it saying, yes, I enjoyed that because it was quick, or yes, I enjoyed that because I liked thinking something through in that, I liked the puzzle aspect. So I think, for me, being able to explain why I liked something is really, really important.
I think, yeah, and we've got lots of comments about this question. Robert saying, yes, it's important, but I now ask designers what they want feedback
Yes.
on. I don't just wax lyrical. And Robert's still not made it to virtual playtesting. There's no obligation for you to do anything. Do what you're comfortable with. Alex says it's interesting to see the differences between how people act during the game and the impression they give after it. Sometimes I've had pretty positive feedback after seeing someone look miserable and losing through most of the playtest, and vice versa.
No, I think he means look lost, as in look confused. During the playtest.
They look lost. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is true. But then sometimes sometimes that goes back to what you were saying earlier, Bez, about how many times you playtest. Because I tend to because I quite like playing a short game twice, and the first game is often a throwaway game, and then the second game it's like, oh, now I know what I'm doing. Plus, some people just wear their emotions on their faces much more easily than others.
And the thing is, if you are lost, then that might actually make you more excited to play it. But yeah, back to the question, which Alex didn't actually answer, about how important it is for you to have your say. CD says, yes, it's very important. I really want to have my say because I feel I can improve things. I recognize that about myself, that I want to be able to improve the system around me, or I will leave. And I think that I am kind of like CD here. Like, I wouldn't actually leave because as a designer, obviously, there's a sense of reciprocation. But again, with that one playtest that I mentioned, it felt like, well, you didn't need me then. There's no parts of that where you needed me. It could have been anyone. You just needed a warm body to kind of move around these pieces. And it feels, I guess I know that playtesting isn't a case of stroking playtesters' ego, but it is still a partnership. And as designers, we do need playtesters. And even if most of the feedback is already, well, I saw you exploiting that and making that really getting 100 points when everyone else only got 90 points total. You got 100 points with this one thing, with this one card. So clearly that's terrible. But yeah, I think that whilst I wouldn't want need someone to say, yes, this is clearly broken, and I would say, yes, thank you for showing that with your actions, and that's already now, thanks to you, that's now on my radar to try and sort out. And I think it's sometimes, as a designer, it's incumbent upon us to sometimes, yes, give playtesters an impression of what they have done and what we would change thanks to them.
Yes, the thing that I find comes up for me fairly regularly in games which are mine and other people are playtesting is quite often there is, to me, something which is really obvious, but other players don't take that option, and so the question for me is often, okay, what have they not done? It's not necessarily what have they done, but what have they not done? And I'm sitting there going, well, it's obvious. You have to give so and so your card. But it's not necessarily obvious, and so it becomes a question of how do you highlight those bits? How do you push? How does the game nudge the players towards sensible solutions?
And a couple of other quick comments. I know there's a few that we didn't get to, and thank you for everything along the way. Robert just wants to mention that when saying that games are not theirs, the feedback becomes more blunt. Do playtesters moderate themselves when talking to the actual designer? This is interesting because I've actually playtested things that genuinely aren't mine about the L deck. I haven't found that people are more blunt when talking about L deck contest entries versus my games, but I do always try to push people to be more negative when I'm pushing for feedback. I frame the questions as, what was your least favorite parts about the game, or was it too long? Kind of to get them in the mindset of already finding criticism. Yeah, Robert mentions a ridiculous thing, someone talking for 2 minutes before saying just, I don't like area control. And that would have been a useful thing to say at the start. Alex says, I like to have a say, but I have to try and remind myself that this game may not necessarily be aimed towards my taste. And there's a natural urge to say, but there's a natural urge to try and be helpful, even if it's unhelpful. And I think this is really interesting. And so what I think, if we move over, firstly, over to you. What are you up to? You can share button if you want to get your comments into the thing. But whilst people are typing up what they're up to recap and wrap up, leaves are brilliant, and playtesting is generally brilliant. Observation is probably more useful than the discussion. If I could only choose one, it would clearly be the observation. And frankly, lots of the time, if I would rather have things that are more focused on the observation, but that's my viewpoint. And discussion is good for reinforcing and double checking what you may have observed, and sometimes double checking anything that people might have been too shy. As you said, Jess, some people are really good at wearing their hearts on their sleeves. Some people keep themselves bottled up. So if you can't tell what someone is thinking, then that's a nice place to ask. And also, the key thing that everyone wants to have a point to say their piece. And as a playtester, the other thing I sometimes like to do is, at this point, if I know that my view is not particularly going to be helpful necessarily, I could tell you how I would personally redesign the game, and possibly even come up with something that's going to be, it won't be your game necessarily. And so rather than do that, I might try and be a bit more, part of it is what's the word like when you ask questions to teach someone, Socratic method. So I'll ask, why did you do this? Partially because it's a nicer way of doing things, and partially because actually I'm interested in that myself. And it's a cheeky way of, I learned something, but I've spent like all this time, and whilst I am focused on it, it is a reminder, hey, maybe this thing isn't right, but if it is right, why did you do that? And that gives you a bit of time to hopefully go through your thoughts and have a bit of a sounding board, which hopefully, again, is going to be useful to the designer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think that's a recap and wrap up, all done. So what are you up to after this, Jess?
Oh, what am I up to? So today I am mainly looking after my 2 small children. They go back to school next week. I have got an awful lot of final touches for things to do with Library Labyrinth. We've got all the stuff done, but it's things like making sure that all the text on the cards, making sure that it's all in true black instead of just very almost black, which the printer is not happy about. You know, they came back and said this card and this card and this card have bits of text on them that is not in true black, and so I have to go through every single file and make sure that it's all in true black. And then it's the box top is done, the box bottom I've got to make sure that it's not too pixelated, and so there's a list which is about this long and it's got about 50 things on it, but they're all things like, make sure that the bleed is okay on this file, make sure, and I tell you, I'm okay at this, but this is not my primary this is not my primary skill set. So I'm going to spend the next week pretending to be a graphic designer, basically.
I do not envy you, and it's my least favourite parts of the process. Robert says, I'm up to rules writing and hope to get my rule and more game ready to pitch. Later, playing actual games with friends sounds lovely. CD
Actual
says,
games?
I'm going to bed. And
excellent.
Yeah, you've got some Alex in reply to Jess says, oh gosh, it sounds tough. And good for you, says CD.
Yeah.
Well,
this afternoon I've got a break from that to do some democracy things. So if anybody wants to come and watch a democracy thing later this evening, I think there's a UD thing, which stands for Unlock Democracy, where I believe I'm chairing a meeting of 4 different people, and I think we've got 700 people signed up to come on Zoom. So that'll be fun. Means I should probably brush my hair.
I mean, it looks good from here. But Alex says, I'm playing the piano, then lunch, then the park. I am spending one more day in this city before I go back down to London tomorrow morning. I'm going to chill out, maybe look at my stuff because I'm in my old childhood room, see if I can get rid of some stuff to make space for my parents to put more stuff in here, more of their stuff in here. Like this whole table that the laptop is on, by the way, is completely covered with my mom's stuff, which is like quite nice because it means that, there's all these plants and I'm not going to go into all the other things because that feels a bit personal. But
plants with leaves. We saw one of the leaves.
Yes.
Hey, there it is
probably
again.
a bit too close. There you go.
Is.
A close-up of a leaf. I will be enjoying myself. I will be having another chippy. I will be taking it easy, honestly. I will be doing whatever I want. Maybe that's the thing I'm looking forward to the most, going to the chippy for their lunch special at 11:30, which is in 6 minutes. And so, yes, that's when it's opened. So, for now, I hope you all have lovely days. I also have a solo game that I might play a bit more for the L deck that I invented on Monday. So, or I might or other things. If you want to check me out, I'm Stuff My Beds everywhere. Stuffmybeds.com/streams will take you to all those things. If you want to check out Jess, where would you like to be found?
Come and find me on Twitter. So I'm being a little bit quiet at the moment, but that is mainly because I am just doing all of the Library Labyrinth stuff. But come to Descent Games on Twitter, and or you can go to librarylabyrinth.com. That's the website. Descentgames.com is that's got sort of general stuff about what we're doing. But come find me on Twitter.
So thank you very much. I'm not going to run a raid today, but I'm just going to say lots of love to everyone. It's been a lovely chat. Major thanks to Jess
This
over
way,
there.
yeah.
Thank you
Hey,
very
hello.
much, Jess. And the only thing left to say is, as always, bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.